3, 2, 1. Neil Eastwood, you are the author of Saving Social Care. You're the founder of Sticky People. You're also latterly the founder and CEO of Care Friends. Welcome.
Yeah, hey, nice to see you.
Welcome to the Care Home Show. So I'm delighted to have you back on the show for the second time. For our regular audience will know that you're actually on the first ever episode of the Care Show,
yes.
Care Home Show, way back when. So it's fantastic to have you back. Before you tell me a little bit about what's been going on since our last conversation, for anyone that didn't watch the last show, can you give us a bit of an intro into Neil Eastwood and what it is you're up to in the world?
Yeah, sure. So I am, I guess, entirely focused on recruitment and retention of care staff and nurses, but largely care staff. I've been doing that for 11 years. So I'm personally interested in trying to figure out solutions to the impending care worker crisis. It's arrived with us already, I guess, but there's much more demand coming down the pipe. So can we do things differently, and are there solutions that I can share with the care sector to help them make this less painful than it is? And that has been a journey of providing consulting, doing research, which we might talk about in a bit. Also providing psychometric screening tools. I wrote a book called Saving Social Care a couple of years ago, which many people might have heard of. And then more latterly, Care Friends is taking over my life, which we'll perhaps come on to in a bit.
Absolutely. Okay, great. So thanks for that overview. So tell me, so what's been going on in your world since we last met? I think you were right in the early stages of Care Friends then. You were in the process of kind of getting it off the ground. So, so what's the latest?
Well, it feels like an awfully long time since we last met in terms of the life cycle of Care Friends. And obviously it's an early stage startup. So for those out there, and it hasn't been launched, so people won't necessarily know what Care Friends is. So Care Friends is an employee referral app. And the idea of that is that it's gamifying the employee referral process so that care staff can refer their friends and their contacts and their family to come and work with them much more easily than they could do with a normal employee referral scheme. So that's the idea of the app. And where we were when we met last was very early stages, about to do a beta trial, so a larger scale trial. We did an initial pilot with a prototype, very clunky prototype with a home care provider in Surrey, and that yielded some really interesting results. And on the basis of that, we got some EU funding, and that focused us then on Cornwall because that's where the funding was centred. And can we improve the number of care staff that we can find and recruit in Cornwall to serve that particular market? And it's a really tough recruitment market, like the whole country, but if you are a care provider in Cornwall, basically half your recruitment territory is the sea. So it gets really pressurised.
Sure.
So that's where we were focused, and so we launched the app there with care providers to try it out and see what the results were. And that finishes in December.
Got you. Okay, excellent. So you've also done, I understand, some research recently as well, which I guess kind of underpins some of the reasonings behind the Care Friends platform itself.
Yes.
Obviously, we'll come on to that in a little bit. But so tell me a little bit about. Okay, so if I were a care worker, what would be the benefit of me using the app?
So we know quite a number of care workers. The majority of care workers would like to refer their friends. So they do know people that could work with them, that would be very good, potentially care staff, support workers, care assistants. But they often forget when they see them to say, "Oh, Simon, you should consider working with me." So that often, and they don't see them that often. So there's a bit of a disconnect. It's also, if you're running almost every employee referral scheme is kind of go and get a bit of paper, fill it in, we might remember to pay you. There's a lot of inefficiency and it's admin heavy. So the benefit to a care assistant in a care home or a home care worker or whoever is that the app is on your phone and it gives you instant notification of what's happening with any application that anyone that is recommended. It's very simple to recommend somebody, so you can push the job with a personal message with 3 taps. and then you receive points. So we've gamified the process. So points are money, and the current currency we're mostly using is 1 point is £1, but we are trying other currencies, like 1 point is 1 pence. But anyway, you get some money for doing it, and you build up these points, and you get them instantly, and you know exactly what's going on. And so you're incentivized prior to hire. So what normally happens, and one of the big failings we found with an employee referral scheme, is that you have to wait to get paid. So typically a provider, an employer might say, right, well, you've recommended somebody, Simon, but I'm going to give them 3 months, say I'm the new person. I want to see if Neil lasts 3 months before I pay you anything.
Sure. Okay.
Meantime, they're paying internet job boards up front for no guarantee of anything.
Sure. Yeah.
And often the quality that you get through that is very poor. So what we need to do is redress that, and by using gamification, by giving the points, we're incentivizing early stage effort.
Sure.
And that worked really well. And there's a leaderboard as well, and some people really love that kind of competitive angle.
So how does the leaderboard element work? Is that home specific? Is that group specific? Is that kind of how does the?
It's both home specific. It can be home specific, and it can be organisation wide as well.
Okay.
So you can look at it two different ways.
Sure.
And so what we're trying to do is you can incentivise within the team, and you can also incentivise teams. Different homes, say in a group.
Sure. Okay. And are there almost different pay scales, if you like, for the care worker refers a friend, they get the initial pound or whatever the currency is for the initial introduction, and then are they stages of kind of a payoff throughout that process as they progress through the recruitment stages, or how does that part work?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the first thing you would do, and what we would recommend rewarding, and you don't have to reward it, is the initial share. So if I'm incentivised with a small amount of points to share a job with my friends. Now we have capped that at 10 a month in terms of points. Not you can share as much as you like, because in the original pilot, 2 care workers shared with each other 1,300 times and basically tried to blow the system up. So we were like, oh, okay, well we better fix that. But so yes, you're incentivized a small amount to physically think about who could I share it with and share. And you can share it on Facebook, but most popular by far is a direct connection with someone you know. So SMS or WhatsApp, I would be connecting with you directly saying, oh, Simon, I think you'd be the guy for this. So, but you can put it on Facebook more widely. Then the next stage that you would get points is if you then applied. And it's not a full application, it's just kind of name and postcode and contact details. Sure. So you're expressing interest, you're responding to the recruiter by saying, oh, I might be interested in what Neil's just told me. Yep. That then immediately delivers me points. So I'm now getting a little bit more. And then the next stage is successful interview. So if you turn up for interview, and we know employee referrals do turn up for interview, those referred applicants, interviewees turn up for interview, much more likely to turn up than someone from Internet Job Board, for example. So that's all good news. But if they come and they're successful, if you turned up for interview, you're successful, then you would get more points. Maybe 5 points or £5, or the referrer would get, or it could be 10, whatever you want to pay. And then the next stage is on hire, and I like to think that the majority of the money would be, the points would be on hire, because the closer you bring the reward and the effort, the better this thing gets a positive reinforcement cycle going. Yeah, sure. And then we have a stage that we set originally at 12 months, like a loyalty bonus for us both being in the organisation in 12 months' time. Okay. I would get the points if I'd referred you, the fact that you'd stayed a year. But we are going to make that very soon customisable so that you could say, oh, I'll pay after 3 months or 6 months or whatever. So we're kind of mimicking what's happening at the moment with an employee referral stage payment. Like paying after probation is quite a common thing to do. Sure. And then the final trigger, and it's not a stage, it's a state really, is which is my favourite, which is a bonus on hire. If I referred you and you're new to the care sector, and we have added to the workforce globally by one person, I would get a bonus of points because I have grown the workforce and not, to say, taken someone from another care home and brought them across. And that will happen, but what we're trying to do with the bonus is incentivise people to think, who has the right values here? and that seems to be working, because at the moment what we've seen in the pilot is 2/3 of all of the people who've been successful, who've applied, are new to the care sector.
Sure. Okay. You've answered one of the questions I was going to ask anyway. But relevant to ask any care home manager in the country, and one of their biggest frustrations will be the let's say, call it the conversion of booking an interview to that candidate actually turning up.
Yes.
So internet job boards, historically, the fallout rate is particularly high.
Yeah.
And obviously, when you're a care home manager and you're time starved in the first place, teeing up interviews that don't materialise, that's a big frustration. Do you know the difference between the level of conversion from a referral from a friend relevant to that of maybe an internet job board?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent question, and it's one of the most common questions, or rather, when I talk to recruiters and managers, I say, what pain are you feeling most about recruitment? And it's no-shows. And in and of itself, no-shows are, not as bad, let's say, as someone joining and then leaving quickly. You might have to get agency staff in, or it actually gets more costly the further they go through the process. But it's very disruptive and demoralising, and it ruins your day if you've set aside some time. So we would say at the moment that the no-show rate is running at worse than 50%. Given that the majority of applications are sourced from internet job boards and others as well, but primarily it's internet job boards that are driving the no-show rate. And so that no-show rate is probably now around 60% would no-show. It does vary. I mean, we'll get cases of you might have 9 interviews and nobody shows up. So it does vary, but that's probably where it's at. When you look at employee referrals, then we're around about 20% no-show rate, something like that. I mean, we're starting to get the stats out of Care Friends, and we think that the no-show rate might creep up, because if you refer people on, say, Facebook, your Facebook group, you might not know everybody as well as a personal relationship that we might have.
That makes sense.
So it's likely to be somewhere between a referral, as we're used to it, at 20 or 10%, maybe slightly worse, but we don't know yet. Particularly, but it's much, much better, and the reasons for that are kind of obvious. You feel an obligation to turn up as well, because your friend has recommended you. You feel a more personal connection with the company than you would do if it's just another care home that you've applied to 5 in the local area. You have no idea what the difference is between them, and they're all paying about the same. So there's no relationship. So it's very different, and it makes a big difference.
Give me a quick a reminder on, what's the current carer shortfall in the UK?
Skills for Care publish, it's going up all the time. There are hundreds of thousands of vacancies that we have. And I think the shortfall is understated, because the demand is really growing hugely. So I think it's a constantly worsening thing. And then when you look at the staff turnover cycle, and when we look at the first 90-day survival rate, that's always the worst period of time for people to leave. So there's a bigger issue than the vacancy rates would show. Equally, what we don't measure often is from offer to hire. So I think none of the statistics would capture the fact that I've offered you a job and then you don't turn up. And we think 40 to 50% of people who are offered a job in social care fail to turn up.
Okay, that's interesting.
And so that's an even bigger issue. So I don't know if it's meaningful to say, is there a particular vacancy rate, because I think it's we've got leakage at all parts of the process, and some are hidden.
Got you. And relevant to, I guess, kind of plugging those gaps, and then kind of on a wider basis, kind of what results have you seen so far with the beta launch that you've done so far, and then the kind of the wider launch that you've done more recently? So
with the beta trial, so we've ended up at about 20 providers using as of right now. 20 providers are using the app live. We added them as we went through, so not everybody started at the beginning. And when we started, we had quite a lot of bugs, technical issues with the system that I guess is normal, but I wasn't expecting. So we had a kind of juddering start, really, where some care staff found problems sharing and so on. So as you work through that, what's happened is the statistics have started to emerge.
Okay.
And at the moment, for every 100, and we have about 700 care workers using it right now, and that will increase rapidly. As for every 100 care workers, every month there's about 15 applications. Now, we don't want to get fixated on the volume of applications that we're delivering, because you can go to an internet job board and put an ad and get volume. It's about quality, and that, I think, is one of the failings of kind of recruitment in social care, is we're measuring the wrong things.
Sure.
So those, what we want is people that stay, quality people that are more likely to join, more likely to show up for an interview, and more likely to stay. If each one of those you add, you don't have to replace 3 times in a year.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So tech's one of those things that ultimately quite often overpromises and underdelivers.
It does.
So what challenges have you had around just making sure that the platform is delivering the value that you're looking to achieve?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think it's said widely, and I completely agree that it's not about the tech. It has to be a platform that enables people to be more effective and efficient, and it's the people bit. So if you take something like CareFriends, which is not a compulsory thing to use, it's not a core business process, so it has to be fun for the care staff. They have to get engaged in it. We don't need every member of staff to be using it for it to be a success. So if you think at the moment, a few % of the staff, probably around 8% or less, and it will vary by care home, are the referrers.
Sure.
What we need to do is to increase that number. So it will still be a success if you go to a third, or where we are kind of settling out at the moment is about half of the staff become recruiters, which creates a lot of opportunity and a lot more growth. But the number one challenge I guess we face, looking at from a CareFriends point of view, is that we have an initial launch. So if you have 200 staff or 1,000 staff, if you wanted to implement CareFriends, the first thing we have to do is think about how do we reach those existing staff. And that is a problem that you face if you want them to do anything. So if you want to tell staff anything, if you want them to react to something, if you need them to respond to a survey, it's notoriously difficult in the social care sector to get like a big response rate.
Sure.
So we have to work on ways of doing that, and we've gone to an internal communications agency to come up with materials and look at the wording and talk to care staff to understand how can we communicate the benefit to get them to do something like download the app in the first place.
Sure.
And then once they download it, it's got a very high engagement rate. So that's our kind of, I guess, the core the challenge that we would face, and I think a lot of technology does overpromise. So I'm being very cautious about saying, look, we don't have all the answers here. What we want to do is create a platform, and then we want to create an online community of, say, the recruiters and the managers and people who are using the app, the portal users, as we will call them, so they can share best practice with each other. And it isn't all about us saying, oh, you should do this or that. I think we create the platform, and then I think it can be taken on by the sector. That's the plan.
I think that community piece is really, really important as well, from the perspective of kind of let's call it mass market adoption, because if you've got people who are I think as humans we're designed to want to contribute to something. So if you're contributing something that's relevant to your job on a day-to-day basis, but then contributing something to kind of a wider community of people who are like-minded, experiencing similar challenges and things like that, who recognise that from a recruitment and retention perspective that we are in crisis, both in the UK and elsewhere, people being able to share that best practice, it starts with technology. It's ultimately it's going to be the proliferation of the technology is going to be via people, but you've got the potential for it to turn into almost like a movement, because you've got so many different people getting behind the concept of, well, if we recognise, and we'll come on to the stats, that the referrers of high performance care workers are far higher, the both the conversion and the people that end up working with the care homes, they stick around far longer. Is that's the source to market. It's a case of, okay, so this is what we need to be doing. This is where our attention needs to lie to be able to go and start plugging some of those leaky gaps that we talked about earlier on.
Yeah, and I think, well, we'll come on to the research in a second, but I think you make a very good point in that, and my experience has been when I've tried to get different providers in a room to talk about, the challenges of recruitment and retention, that they're kind of sometimes a bit reticent to share, the stats or what's going wrong with them because they're fearful that, I don't want to share this information. And I think we're not all chasing. One of the critical differentiators of Care Friends is that it is tapping into a private network of the connections of your staff in the community. It is not everybody chasing somebody who's applied on Indeed or or even the job centre or wherever someone spotted them. So there isn't as much competition. So I think even in a local area, I would expect to see people wanting to share to get the most out of the platform. And I think there are many ways we have it. We're only just scratching the surface, really. So one example is when we launched the prototype, we said, right, well, it's an employee referral app. That's what it does. And then very soon, 2 weeks into the pilot, the owner of that business, it was a home care business, said, oh, could we give bonus points for other things? So fine about the referrals, but can we reward people for a thank you from a client coming in, or an achievement, they've just got the care certificate, or an incentive, would anyone like to work on this shift that's just been dropped, or we'll give you extra points. Or can you return a survey, can you provide any client compliments, whatever it is. And that suddenly changes this into something that should be or will be sourcing high quality people that stay longer anyway. We know that that's the case with employee referrals. But equally for any member of staff, wherever they were sourced, the ability to reward them instantly with a quick thank you.
Yep.
So instead of someone saying, oh, we'll have to go down the shop, Simon, and buy like some vouchers and then come back and then, oh, where are they? They've gone off shift or whatever. You can instantly just, with a couple of taps, send them something and they get it on their phone.
That's a nice touch.
So I think in this world of instant gratification, people expect stuff to happen now. And I think a lot of recruitment and retention in social care and in other sectors is way too out of date, old-fashioned. We need to move everything to be much, much faster. So it's not about the money you pay in referrals, it's about the speed of telling them what's going on and giving them a thank you, I think.
It's interesting. I went to an event with Angela Boxall, the COO at Majesticare. Would have been a couple of months ago now, and it was about looking after your employees, about the workforce. But specifically, it was about the recognition of team members and kind of the different levels of recognising your team. And sometimes just a little thank you can go an awfully long way. It doesn't necessarily have to cost anything, albeit you can do it with kind of a small kind of gesture, whether that be kind of whether that have a monetary value or some type of voucher or something along those lines, and that just consistency, having a culture of rewarding people when they do things well. Funnily enough, the impact that has on a team member is going to be huge because people appreciate being appreciated. It's a sort of fundamental human need as such, and it's tapping into that and then making it work to address ultimately what is a massive problem.
Absolutely, and I think this is. Unlike many other sectors, this is a vocational sector. So people have not chosen to come here for the money. They largely there's some other reason, and we'll look at those reasons in a bit. And so, what's our role as an employer? We should be recognising the contribution they're making. And in many cases, you can't necessarily do it with money. So affirmation, appreciation, and to some extent recognition. Those are two quite different things. Recognition being more public thing, and appreciation being a kind of more informal thing. But the more we can introduce that, then it will improve the culture and the motivation and the engagement of the workforce. Absolutely.
Big fan of that. I think that will make that small shift that the owner of the home care business. I think that could be something that will prove to be really quite valuable as the platform develops and grows and things like that. So, on the subject of growth and kind of the future and things like that, where do you see Care Friends? Like, what does the future look like?
Yeah, I think it's looking really exciting. So we have as of right now, 176 providers are on a wait list, and we haven't announced. People have heard through mediums like this or the first video you did. I mentioned it. I talk about it a little bit when I present. We're not doing a kind of campaign or anything. We're launching next year. We still have things to learn, and we're still improving the product, and we will continue to do that. But I think it does have the possibility, without tooting my own trumpet at all, whoever came up with the idea, this platform does have an awful lot of potential as long as the price is really, really low. And I'm adamant that we're going to keep the price super low so that it can be affordable to, take the example of Cornwall again, a 25-person small care home, hardly any money, council funded, under pressure.
Sure.
They can afford it. So it could be a ubiquitous platform for the sector. But I don't want to live to regret my grand claims. But it does have the potential to become, a major alternative channel. And as we're going to talk about in a minute, the research kind of backs up that should. We're pointing our guns in the right place to find the right kinds of people that really fit in the care sector.
Ultimately, it's a ubiquitous challenge for the sector. So one would hope that the scope and scale of the platform should be able to meet that. Obviously, that's a big old journey, and it'll take some time to even go some way to be operating on a kind of a mass market basis. But you seem to be making all the right moves at the moment, which is good to see.
Yeah, and I think what we need to do. There will be there's two types of people that the app will bring in. Like any recruitment platform will do. Those people are already in the sector, and that creates churn effectively.
Sure.
And so we don't necessarily want that so much. That's why we use the NutriCare bonus to try and say, hang on a minute. I think that right now there are enough people in the community around any care setting to fulfill the needs and this vacancy gap that we have. I think there are enough people. They're not aware and they're not looking for a job, and we don't have a way of speaking to them.
Sure.
But imagine if we activated the 1.4 or 5 million workforce, or half of them is probably where we'd end up if everybody took it on. Oh my goodness, if they were looking for people, we would have an awful lot of high quality people curious and interested, thinking, I never thought of care, but perfect, I'll do it then.
Especially if it comes from a recommendation from somebody that they know, like, and trust in the first place.
Exactly.
Right. You know what? You'd be really good at this.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a little bit more about my job.
Yeah, and another thing that happens, and one of the challenges, and everyone watching this will know, is that personal care or challenging behaviour or a combination of those two things is very off-putting for people that are kind of, I don't want to do that. And the perception is, so if I visit any care home, and I did last week, I'm in the taxi from the station, and I say to the taxi driver, what's the reputation of this home I'm going to? And they all have an answer.
Okay.
Sometimes good, sometimes bad. And I think the perception often is, don't work there, or it's all about wiping bottoms, for example.
Right,
but it isn't that. And what happens is, if I'm an employee recommending you, I will manage that process with you. I'll say, look, Simon, there are elements to this, but it really doesn't matter, and it's not the whole job. And you build a relationship with your residents and your clients, and then it's just part of the job. Whereas if you don't have that, you come in cold and think, oh my goodness, so that it helps in many ways. The referral of a friend, of a trusted source, as you said.
Sure, that makes sense. So I know that you've been doing some research around high-performing care workers. So how does that link back to Care Friends? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so first of all, what the research I've been doing is I've called it Clone a Care Worker. And I've done this for 5 years around the world, but I obviously focused on the UK. And the way it works is I ask typically registered managers who come to my workshops, you have some homework to do. Before you come, pick one member of staff that you would like to clone, which is effectively their highest performing member of staff. And hopefully they have more than one, but you've really got to pick one. And I want you to ask them a couple of questions before and bring those answers with you. And one of those questions is, what source found them? What recruitment source did they come from? How did they hear about the organisation? That's the first question. And there, the connection with Care Friends comes in, because what we found from the research, and I think we can show it on the screen, is is amazingly, considering there's relatively a small amount of referrals compared to the number of internet job board applicants, is that half of those high performers, and we've asked 300 odd, come from mostly from employee referral, but also word of mouth, which is kind of employee referral in some ways as well.
Sure.
It's because it could be categorised slightly the same. So it's word of mouth in the community drives half of all of the high performers, and there's a chunk for. As you can see on the screen, there's a chunk from walk-ins as well. So what I think we've missed is that the community word of mouth sources are the secret to finding great quality staff, and yet most of our focus is on internet job boards and internet digital sources because we might perceive as recruiters and managers that it's a bit of an easier thing to do is post a job ad. But adverts, paying money, is a really poor performing way of finding staff.
Sure.
So we need to drive word of mouth, and employee referral, is over a third, is 3 times as effective a deliverer of high performers than an internet job board. That's what the research tells us. And I've shared some of this particular piece of the research on social media, and there's been a lot of comments saying absolutely, totally agree with you. So that, I think, is really stunning for people to realise, hang on a minute, what is my recruitment sourcing looking like? Is it matching the donut on the screen, or is it way off? So I'm like typically 50 or 70% on internet job boards, and very little employee referral. My employee referral scheme is a forgotten thing. So that's what we found is that if you want high performers, get your staff to find them.
What I find really interesting about that, and that's the so we always talk about the fact that using the kind of the Branson quote almost, the fact that your team are more important than your customers, because ultimately your team are going to look after your customers. I've completely butchered that. I can't remember exactly how it is, but you understand the concept of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like that, having a cohesive high performance team in the first place, looking after your people, ultimately that reflects into the communities that your home care or your care home business is ultimately serving.
Yes.
And there's your recruitment channel. So if there was ever a reason to look after people and to develop people and to create an environment and a culture where people are being really, really looked after, it's if people are looking for the pound, shillings and pence reason to build a high performance culture and to have the right ethos and values within an organisation, there's a very quick, easy lever that you can pull to say you're going to save an absolute shed load on spending money with recruitment agencies and expensive job boards and things like that. Which, as you said, the actual the conversion rate of getting people on board is pittance in comparison to what that referral network could basically look like.
Yeah, and I think so people will say to me, okay, so how many referrals could I expect to get? And I think that's a variable number because it depends on a range of factors, like are your staff engaged, are they happy, are you treating them well? It's exactly the point you're making. I like to think of referrals and word of mouth and walk-ins, that kind of your reputation, your employer brand in the community, and how that brings people in as a sort of renewable energy source, which is sometimes the wind isn't blowing and it's variable and I can't guarantee exactly what you're going to get, and the timing won't necessarily be what you want, but you will have a bedrock of high quality people, kind of hopefully more than trickling, but kind of flowing in to give you 10, 20, 30% of your workforce, of your recruitment needs are the high quality people. But you still need to burn some coal, potentially, and you still need to go onto the target active job seekers, and that's hard because everyone else is chasing them, and those groups of job seekers are dropping away.
Sure.
So I think we need to wean ourselves off those sources, off the kind of fossil fuel sources, and we need to go to the renewable sources, the clean energy of your staff, picking people out with the right values in the community. And we can't rely on people that have decided to look for a job. We have to find people that are unhappy in retail, in teaching, in whatever they're doing, or we'll see in some of the research we're going to talk about a bit later, other things that they're doing to do with caring. Where are these people? We just need to find them, and our staff are the best workforce to do that.
Sure. You very kindly responded to a friend of mine posted about the fact that there's a real opportunity and the fact that, let's face it, the high street's not exactly in a great way at the moment, and they're having to let go of people, kind of hand over fist, to be able to say to take advantage of that. That sounds negative, but to be able to leverage that ultimately and get some of those good people that have the right values and ethos into the care sector. Ultimately, that fixes two problems concurrently. So being able to address those two things is going to be really, really important. Something struck me whilst you were talking. Then it will be so interesting to see if you can accumulate data after the fact. So let's say 12, 24 months into, you've built a community of people of whom have been referred through their friends.
Yeah.
Then what the net gain of having that group of people working within the organisation looks like as well.
Yeah.
Quite how you quantify that and stuff like that. There's probably stuff that you're thinking about for kind of the future of the platform. And
yeah,
things like
we're
that,
already tracking. But if you want to track staff tenure by source, then of course that can take you a long time because staff will stay a long time. So you have to look at the median and try and track the trajectory of people. So everyone who does starts on day one, right? So we have 100% of everybody, and then we know their sources, and then we would watch, and we're doing this. We can watch the rapid decline in a kind of average of internet job boards. So how long are those people staying? We can see that dropping quite quickly.
Sure.
So you sort of lose people between. Can be up to 80% of people from a job board you'll lose in the first year. And then you look at the trajectory of as people leave from employee referrals, and that's a much shallower flight path. And so we need to get more data, but there's absolutely no doubt that employee referrals stay longer. And in fact, people that refer stay longer. So the fact that, and that makes sense because they're referring because they're proud to work there and they're happy, I guess. So the whole thing, is
it's a very
feeds off
natural
itself.
advocation, though, isn't it? Like if you're excited about your job and you love what you do, and it provides you with the fulfilment and meaning and purpose that you want. If you can see, again, it comes down to values and things, but if you can see similar values in someone else, you can share that passion together. Yeah. And then also as well, like if you have friends at work, that makes work more fun. It's just a relatively simple principle, but if you work with a load of people that you don't particularly get on with in the first place, then having people around that are going to be of like mind who have a similar worldview and things like that, it's going to make work more fun. You're going to become more engaged. You're going to feel more fulfilled yourself personally anyway. So it's on an individual personal level, there's a level of fulfillment obviously that comes with that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, people do say, oh, well, I mean, particularly in a residential setting, and many of your viewers will have residential settings as opposed to, say, a community-based setting, then, some people say, oh, well, sometimes we have a problem where there's a family members have been referred and so on, and they're in the same kind of area. And yes, you do sometimes get that. I think that's really a management challenge because you will, people will form friendships anyway. So you're going to have some risk of, favoritism or whatever. I mean, it would probably never, employee referrals will probably never deliver all of the staff that we need. I think what they are presenting to us is an opportunity to go from almost zero in many cases, to 20, 30, 40% of the staff. And then you've got other sources as well. So I think it's part of the solution. My hopes for Care Friends are really that this buys us time. That buys us time to figure other things out, because the demand coming down the pipe as people age is monstrous. It's a huge issue, and obviously with immigration policies kind of heading in the opposite direction to perhaps what we need. So we're going to have to come up with some clever solutions, and what I think Care Friends will do is say, oh, we've got these passive applicants, we've got this community we haven't sourced, let's refine that, let's get as much as we can out of that, and then we need to rethink. And I think if you go down the track, some other things will come and help us, like for example, as automation comes in, as more as different things happen technologically, we might find, say, as you've given the example right now with retail is shedding, or people are feeling worried if they're not lost their jobs. That is a potential pool of people that we can speak to. But in the future, maybe more men. For example, if there's driverless commercial vehicles and taxis and so on, and maybe in the future, there's a lot of men or male-dominated professions that start displacing the workforce. What can we do to talk to them? We would love to have more men into the sector. So how do we how do we go about reaching those people? So I think there are opportunities. We just need to be aware of what they are and know how to reach people and know what to say when we get in front of them. And often we just have one message, which is urgently required care assistance at X pounds an hour. I think we need to be more sophisticated than that.
And I guess the technology allows you to be that sophisticated. You'll be able to start breaking down the numbers and things like that, and then work out specifically for different demographics of people and things to be able to start shaping that narrative so that you can start being able to better talk to those particular people who, again, might be a great addition to the care workforce in the UK and obviously globally as well.
Yeah, and I think we can do smart things in the future potentially, like saying, oh, there's a bonus, if you attract people from certain sectors or whatever. I mean, obviously we need to make sure it's fair to everybody. It's not discriminating in any way, but if we can trigger people. Trigger the care workers by saying, who do you know that cares for a loved one? Who do you know who is exhibiting these patterns that we would think are high potential? Mm-hmm. We can just give them some thoughts that just outside of their existing friend group, who do they come into contact with? So, for example, if they go to a cafe and a waiter or waitress is super kind of helpful and thinks about them a lot, should they be doing that job or should they be in the care sector? So I think it opens up lots of possibilities, but one step at a time.
What it does is it helps people ask better questions relevant to the circumstances, I think, which it's only by asking those questions ultimately we're going to get to the answers that we're looking for, whether that be now or the specific questions that we're asking now or as the crisis deepens as such. So I know that we've got some exciting news today, and the fact that we've got an exclusive launch of some new data. So tell me about the data, Neil. What new things can you tell us?
Well, so I mentioned that there were one of the questions we asked these clone care worker, the registered managers, about this clone care worker, about their high performer. One of the questions was a recruitment source. The other question I asked was, what was the original trigger for that person taking their first step into a paid care role? Mm-hmm. So that might not have been with that manager, it might have been 2 jobs before. So they had to go and find that high performer and say, why did you? What was the trigger? Were you pushed?
Sure.
Did you choose? What was behind the scenes in you being here at all? Mm-hmm. And I think all of the viewers, we're all in the sector. We all have a personal story for how we're here. My story is that I'm a vicar's son, and so I was involved in social care in the 60s and 70s, which I wouldn't have been if my dad wasn't a vicar. So I had exposure and awareness of the sector, and I wanted to come back to it. What we were intensely interested in was is there a pattern of what people were doing before, of how they were reached? So it's not looking, as we were talking about a moment ago, about recruitment source for that particular provider. Mm-hmm. It's, are there any traits or triggers that we can identify? And I think we can put on the screen the results. And what you'll see straight away is, and I am gobsmacked by the how strongly this comes out, and that is that family care, an experience of family care, drives this kind of vocational desire to work in the sector. Mm. And that is really, really interesting, because then it makes you think, what we need to reach out to family carers. So often I find that, particularly with the younger ones, when I talk to under 25-year-olds, high performers, I find that maybe they have a brother or sister with a disability, or they've cared for mum or dad, or they care for a grandparent. And in my case, my dad was 50 when he had me, so I was he was the same age as my parents were the same age as everyone else's grandparents. So I was kind of much more aware of aging, and kind of probably slightly embarrassed by the fact that they seemed older, and they wouldn't play football with me and all that kind of stuff when I was a teenager. So there's definitely something here. And if you then think 1 in 10 of the population has family care experience, and what I find talking to family carers is often informal carers, is often they feel, what am I good for now? I'd love to have some workers either alongside my caring responsibility or after that person perhaps has moved into a care home or no longer needs care. They can often feel like, well, I've been off the job market, I'm worthless, which is terrible when you think they have exactly experienced the intrinsic rewards of care. And I think, what's happening is probably, if you're caring for somebody, then you might have contact with social care. You might have contact with care staff, care assistants. They might be in a hospice or in a home or having home care. then you actually have exposure to social care, which is kind of a Cinderella hidden sector, really, compared to the bright shiny NHS, which is on the TV all the time and has a logo and all a very visible thing. And home care is kind of, or the care sector, social care is hidden away. So they actually have awareness of it, and it makes them think. They have contact with care staff, and hopefully that's been a positive experience. They think, oh, I could possibly do that job. So I think this is super exciting. And then number 2 on the list, I mean, some way below, like three times less, but still a really interesting stat is that the people described having a calling for care. So there are people who just were born to care, and I think what's frustrating often is they're perhaps their empathy and their compassion, they end up in careers, maybe in retail or hairdressing or beauty or something, where we just need to say, actually, there's a better thing for you to be doing that you would love. And that is where employee referral comes in, is knowing those people with a calling for care, when you would think, oh, I know the person who should be doing this job. And so that is driving those people as well. And so those 2 things, way more than the third, which was I was just happened to be looking for local work, and this seemed convenient.
Sure.
So what's exciting about this is that it gives us a pointer towards how can we speak to high potential people who actually they would love the job if only we went and found them.
Sure.
And I think particularly family care is a great example. And then you would say, how would we reach family carers? And there are family care hubs, and I do encourage providers to perhaps offer, if they sign a disclaimer offer, reach out to the family carer groups and say, would you like free space on our moving and handling course? How can we help you support you in your family care work? And that doesn't mean you'll recruit that person. It means you're building a network and goodwill and tentacles out into those family care networks, and that will bring you people. And then supporting the local hospice, where often the friends and family group of a hospice are people who've cared for a loved one who's died, sadly. But that means often they know what family care experience is, and they have time on their hands, and they probably feel like, what can I do now? I spent X number of years looking after somebody. So I think it's profoundly interesting, super exciting. As you can see from the chart, there are actually a whole range of reasons why people come into the sector. There isn't, but family care totally dominates, and I think that is, hopefully the viewers find it an interesting stat.
It certainly is an interesting stat, and what that says to me when you were talking about, how to get the tentacles out there to go and engage with those people, it just reinforces the fact that if you're the care home or the home care business that you're running isn't engaging with your local community on a considerable level, then you're missing out. You're missing a trick, because that's the numbers don't lie. If that's where good people are coming from. If that's the spark, the instigator that gets people into the sector, which we so drastically need, then ultimately that's where people should be looking.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. It's community outreach. The challenge is, if you're bogged down with trying to get hold of people that have potentially or supposedly applied to you on an internet job board, and you can't reach them, and you're waiting for people who don't show up, you're bogged down with all of this volume of poor quality, or like variable quality. It's unfair to say poor quality, but statistically, a few % of the people that apply are going to work out on an active job seeker cohort, and that stops you. That time you've lost is the time you would have been out there either promoting your employee referral scheme or getting out in the community and building networks and deeper links with the community. And you don't get an instant return. I mean, you might do. We have done with Care Friends, actually, had people hired within a few days of the app going out. But broadly speaking, if you're doing outreach more generally, it can take weeks and months before you see a return, and that you think, oh, well, I won't do that. But you absolutely have to do it.
You've got to play the long game.
You do have to play the long game,
Interesting. Okay. That as an exclusive of the Care Home Show, thank you for sharing that that today. I think it's a really useful stat, though, and I think operators are going to be hopefully that will encourage them to ask some questions around. So from the perspective of the recruitment of our teams, like, where are we looking at? Ultimately, are we fishing in the right waters to get the right quality of people?
Yeah, and I think if what this does is just get people to ask themselves the question, I think it's done its job. So I would encourage anybody who is runs or is a registered manager involved in a care home, do the clone a care worker, clone a care assistant, I guess it would be more typically called. Do that yourself. Find out your own answers. And it doesn't have to be one person. You could say, how many people would I consider high performers? How many people would I like 10 more of? There's your cohort. Ask them. And then you've got your own data set. You don't have to. I mean, as is a big data set, and I've never seen anything that varies too much from that. But I think it's always best to do your own. Yeah, work.
Definitely. Also, as well, it's probably a very useful tool just to have to better understand your people, to look at those characteristics and think, okay, so what are we recruiting? What we're recruiting for, which is obviously very important. So
yeah.
I wanted to round off our conversation with a controversial question. So, so Neil, tell me, it's commonly cited that if care workers are paid more money, that ultimately that will fix the recruitment and retention crisis that we're facing. Tell me, what's your view on that?
Yeah, so this is a very, very interesting question. I think it's simplistic to say we need to just put more money into the system and pay care staff more money. I would say from the outset, care staff should be paid more money. It's absolutely essential that they can live, effectively without, some of the terrible stories we hear from the work, or the contact that the care workers charity gets involved with. Hardship cases. It should never happen. Whether there is more money coming into the system and how we can find that money is a political often discussion. So if you look at just the focus on, imagine we had the ability to put more money into the system, to give everyone a pay rise, what would the effect be? And I think it's really rather odd what happens. So we do know increasing, and we've seen this in New Zealand, had a pay equity for the last few years. They've run pay equity with their equivalent of the NHS and with social care. Okay. And I think what's reported anecdotally from providers in New Zealand is that perhaps they were typically at 20-something% staff turnover. That has dropped as a result of paying more money, and it's between 15 and 50%, depending, so a meaningful increase everybody's got. It's their average staff turnover has dropped perhaps to say 16 or 17%. So it's moved things, 5 or 6 percentage points, and that seems to have stuck. So yes, if you pay more money, less people will leave. If you pay more money, depending on the level you do that, it has another effect, which is to increase the number of applications. So people will look at the amount of money and think, oh, I'll do that job because it is more than something else I was going to do. There, it's critical that the providers screen and are fussy about who they take. Because right now, I would say many providers are like, oh, thank goodness there's an applicant. Someone's come for interview. Yeah. And so you're kind of biased to offering them a job. Whereas what we should be doing is values-based recruiting and gatekeeping on behalf of our clients and residents to say, we want consistent quality care. Are you the right person for it? But it's very difficult to do that in a pressurised environment. So pump more money into the wages. What will happen is hourly rates go up, more people apply. We have to screen. Otherwise, what happened in the States when they doubled the hourly rate of care staff in a county to do with unionisation and the living wage at the same time. Some stuff happened in 2002. 18,000 care staff, and the staff turnover varied by ethnic group, but amongst Caucasians, the staff turnover got worse after the money went up.
Okay.
We would also hear that if you give staff more money, they might say, I prefer a work-life balance, and therefore I'm not going to work the weekend now, or I would like to give you some hours back, so I'll earn the same money in fewer shifts. So suddenly now the provider has a problem rostering because they've given more money to staff, and now they're like giving, well, no, I won't take that. I'll take the time. So there's a lot of complexity. Underlying, we do need to pay more money. Obviously, if you at the moment, our method of doing that as a policy method is to push up the living wage, is the minimum pay floor for all sectors. I think there's an argument to say social care should be either on parity with the NHS or as the New Zealand example shows, or slightly differentiated. But what's happening at the moment by pushing up that floor is that what we haven't always seen is more money for the coming in the top to cover it, and so that squeezes then providers in the middle, and can cause some of them to give back contracts or go out of business or whatever. So it also creates the effect of, if you're in a supervisory, the level above, that hasn't been subject to minimum wage increases. So that's static. And what happens is the gap narrows between the two. And then if I was a supervisor saying, why would I do this work for 20p more an hour? You know, all of the responsibility I have, I don't want to do that anymore. I might as well just, go back to doing a care assistant role. So there's lots of complexity below the surface, and I think it's too simplistic. It's not a panacea to pump money into the system. It's essential, if we can, we pay care staff more money and we value them financially, but we need to be very cautious about some of the impacts that might have that we perhaps hadn't expected.
A very well considered and well thought out response, Neil. So
on a dangerous question.
On a very dangerous question, yes, absolutely. So hopefully that will, the result of that question will be that people will better understand the dynamics of the answer to that question. And I don't think there's too many people in the country who are better placed to answer that question. So Neil, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
You so
I look forward
much,
to doing another episode in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to come back.
Cheers, Neil.
Thank you.